Investigators now have two related questions to answer. What caused the right engine's propeller to feather?
Terrain ahead!
And why did the plane bank violently to the left just before impact? At a Songshan Airport hangar, Taiwanese investigators still have no explanation for the crash of TransAsia Flight 235. Video of the turboprop's fatal plunge into the Keelung River has spread worldwide. But clues to what caused the crash are in short supply.
Hello? Okay, thank you. Sir, FDR data's in.
All right, let's have a look.
Investigators hope the plane's flight data recorder can tell them more. The FDR records dozens of performance parameters, including fuel flow, engine temperature, and propeller speed.
Okay, engine flame out check. Check.
Investigators already know that the right side propeller feathered before impact.
Watch the speed.
Let's see the operating systems of Engine 2.
Perhaps the flight data can tell them why.
When we go through the data for engine number 2, we find some parameters were normal, like oil pressure, engine temperature, fuel flow.
Engine's completely fine.
But one other piece of data seems to tell a different story.
Take a look at this. The torque is all over the place.
One parameter, the torque value fluctuated.
Torque is a measure of an engine's power to spin the propeller. It increases and decreases during flight, but it's not supposed to fluctuate.
Why is it doing that? Pass me the schematic.
They dig deeper, studying how the Pratt & Whitney engine measures torque.
So we try to find out the design logic for the system.
What's the connection between the torque and the feathered propellers?
They learned that the engine's auto-feathering system includes an electronic torque sensor. It measures how much twisting force the engine is producing. Extremely low torque indicates that the engine has failed, so a low reading triggers the system to feather the propeller. But they know the engine did not fail. There seems to be only one way to explain the unusual torque data.
Maybe the sensor is sending a faulty reading, triggering the auto-feathering unit.
They suspect the problem was not with the engine itself, but with the sensor measuring torque.
We figured out that that probably will be the signal problem between the torque sensor and the receiver.
Send the sensor to the lab so we can analyze it.
If they're right about the torque sensor failing, then they'll finally have solved the mystery of the feathered propeller. But investigators are no closer to understanding another mysterious aspect of this crash. Why did a two-engine plane with a feathered propeller on the right side end up banking to the left? Searching for an answer, they return to the flight data.
What do the parameters of the left engine say? Can you show me the fuel flow, please?
That all seems fine.
Propeller speed?
According to the data, the left engine was in perfect working order.
Engine number 1's performance was always good. All its statistics were normal.
The power lever angle?
But when they check the throttle settings, they make a stunning discovery.
Unbelievable.
When we go through the FDR data, we find that the power of the number 1 engine was gradually being reduced, and eventually be shut off.
The left engine was manually shut down.
Investigators know the ATR-72 is not equipped with an auto throttle system. The throttles can only be moved by hand.
It had to have been shut down by one of the pilots.
So we start to wondering why the pilot will shut down the good engine.
在调查的过程里面，
Honestly, at the beginning, we did not understand how this could happen.
清楚到底为什么会发生这样的事情。
That's crazy. Let's take a look at the circuit board.
Investigators examine the torque sensor from the right engine of TransAsia Flight 235. They're looking for any defect that could have caused the propeller to feather in flight.
Laboratory 它是用这个
Use precise testing methods. They made a cross-section of the circuit board and
What
looked
you
at its
doing?
image.
看它的镜像。
Nothing much.
Take a look at this. It's a broken
Collecting
cylinder.
CPs.
They discover microscopic faults in the circuit board.
And that was related to the soldering joints in a particular circuit board being compromised for reasons that were difficult to establish.
Why do you ask?
It was possibly related to some form of manufacturing
Curiosity.
defect or something of that nature.
Curiosity killed the good
And
shit, you
that
know?
will be enough to stop the transmission.
True.
With a broken circuit board, the
I should not be
torque
following
sensor couldn't do
Khajiit's
its job.
footsteps.
Even
or
though
Paul's
the engine
steps.
was turning, the sensor couldn't detect any
Wait,
torque,
do Khajiit have
so
paws
the
or
system
feet?
automatically feathered the propeller.
The brain of the system thought that
They
torque
have
had reduced below
feet
a
and
predetermined
hands
value, which
that
I
would
think is about
really
18%,
long nails.
and that is what triggered
Mm.
the auto feather.
Engine flameout check.
So they technically don't count as
Finally,
cats.
they understand why the right side propeller feathered, but they still haven't
Oh,
explained the
Khajiit.
crash. The
I'm pretty sure if you
ATR-72
have
has
two fighting
engines.
each other, it's
Losing
still
propeller
a cat
thrust in one
fight,
of them should not have been a catastrophic event.
They are designed to fly only with one engine.
Straight ahead. Marine.
Pilots train for engine out operations regularly. Typically, it's bread and butter for an airline pilot.
Next time I'm gonna fly
An
over
engine
elsewhere
failure on a multi-engine
and see how it goes.
To figure out why 43 people died, investigators must now answer a
Well, as
much
long as
more
you fly
difficult
nowhere.
question.
We still have number of engine
ha.
produce power normally, but for some reason the pilot decided to shut down the good engine.
Watch the speed.
So, imagining starting up Nowhere Airlines,
We had to find out
not
why.
serving anything aboard, and all the in-flight videos are plane crashes.
The
But the tickets are
investigators turned to the
$19.
cockpit voice recording.
So,
Nowhere
you think
Airlines.
you'd have a lot of customers?
Ready?
Yes,
Let's hear what we got.
I'm 100% sure everybody would want to fly with Nowhere Airlines.
The flight is very short, less than 3 minutes. So we listen to the CVR starting from the takeoff roll to the end of the flight.
Before taxi checklist.
Propeller brake.
Off.
Nose wheel steering.
On. Procedure complete.
Checklist complete. So far, they're following procedure to a T.
You have to make your procedure very clear.
Well, let's see what happens closer to takeoff.
Engine instrument check normal.
V1. V1.
Rotate.
Transition 235, contact approach of 119.7. Good day.
What's that sound?
Must be the engine 2 fault warning.
When the master warning first activated, they were approximately about 1,200 feet above ground level.
They're flying an ATR-72-600. It shouldn't be a huge problem.
If they follow the procedure, do everything correctly, they should be able to fly back to land without any problem.
This is a crucial moment. Let's hear what they're going to do next.
I have control.
Investigators hear the sound of the autopilot turning off.
He's disengaging the autopilot. He shouldn't be doing that.
It's hard to understand why the pilot flying disconnected the autopilot during an emergency situation. He just made a difficult situation worse.
Keep playing.
Okay. Engine flameout check.
Check.
Their attention will be directed to the engine warning display, which in the ATR 72 clearly indicates which engine has failed.
There's a checklist procedure on the screen. You follow it step by step.
But instead of following the emergency checklist,
Watch the speed.
the captain does something inexplicable.
Pull back number 1.
The captain's starting to shut down engine 1 without fully understanding what the computer system is telling him.
Both engines are capable of producing power. But because the right engine has feathered, it has lost thrust, behaving like a car in neutral gear. When the captain pulls back the left throttle, he leaves himself with no thrust from either engine.
He didn't seem to fully appreciate that that had ultimately resulted in number 1 engine being shut down.
How could he do such a thing?
Investigators have discovered from the cockpit voice recorder that the captain of Flight 235 shut down the plane's only working engine.
Why didn't the first officer stop him?
They continue listening to the recording, trying to understand why the captain's mistake wasn't corrected in time.
I will pull back on engine 1 throttle.
You can't just say he's going to shut down the engine.
Pilots are supposed to run a cross-check, where one pilot verifies the actions of the other.
When the pilot flying shut down the operative engine, he did so very quickly without discussing it with the pilot monitoring.
He's acting before even confirming what the emergency is.
When there's a warning come up, the procedure says you identify the problem before you act.
No, wait a second. Cross-check.
The pilot monitoring, to his credit, did try to stop the pilot flying from manipulating the engine number 1 power lever, and he announced he wanted a cross-check, but there was no definitive confirmation from the pilot flying that the problem was engine number 2.
Heading mode.
Instead, the captain interrupts the first officer to ask for a new heading.
We're below 2,500 feet.
Come on.
0.
0905.
The first officer did tell the captain to wait. He knows that the captain was pulling back on the wrong engine. And when he did try to question it, the captain just confirmed what he was doing.
All of a sudden, they've got a dual engine failure, and the pilot monitoring, I think, has been caught off guard, and he's not really sure what's gone on.
Restart the engine.
I can't restart the engine.
Oh well. I shut off the wrong engine.
The pilot flying clearly has an epiphany that they're in very dire trouble.
Restart the engine.
Can't restart the engine.
I shut off the wrong engine.
It's very sad.
When I heard him say, I shut off the wrong engine, I was completely devastated.
其实心里面很难过。
By the time the captain realizes his mistake, it's too late.
Impact! Race way back! Pull up! No!
Unfortunately, neither crew member actually followed the standard set of procedures for dealing with an engine flame-out after takeoff.
Investigators now have an even more puzzling question to answer.
Why didn't the captain understand what he was doing?
The captain's failure to
I
recognize
need
the situation
lunch.
and react properly
I'll be right back.
ended up costing
Lunch?
43 lives.
Well, it sounds better than breakfast at yeah.
Had failed, when the
All right.
aircraft was clearly telling him it was the right engine that had a problem. How could the captain have got things so wrong?
What was this captain's background?
When they dig into the captain's history, they make a disturbing discovery.
The captain failed one of his key training components.
The pilot flying's training records had indicated that he was prone to being a bit anxious,
I have control.
You have control.
feeling a little bit overwhelmed in emergency situations, and had a tendency to prematurely respond or act in that situation.
Pull back number 1.
He was also fired from his last job.
Although the captain was an accomplished military pilot, his civilian record is raising questions.
Maybe he wasn't used to the ATR 72-600.
The records soon confirm that hunch. Leo Cheon-sung had logged relatively few hours in TransAsia's newest commuter plane.
The captain in the left-hand seat had approximately 5,000 hours total time, and he had about 250 hours on the ATR 72-600.
Wait a second. Throttle! Number 1, feather shut off.
The ATR 72-600 is known for its advanced technology. Investigators now wonder if this aircraft, with its computerized glass cockpit, was too complicated for a relatively inexperienced pilot to manage in a crisis.
Restart the engine. And restart the engine.
They can often be overwhelmed with the huge volume of information. They also have to consider the nature of the automation and the modes that are presented to them. So it's more challenging.
I shut off the wrong engine.
Did information overload lead to the deaths of 43 people in one of Taiwan's worst air disasters? Investigators need to know if the advanced technology designed to help pilots in the ATR 72-600 may instead have contributed to the crash of Flight 235 by confusing the TransAsia captain.
Hey, ready to fly out of Taipei?
Let's do it.
To try to find out, they program a flight simulator using the flight data from the downed plane.
We have weather information, we have FDR data, we have CVR data. So we put those together to duplicate the condition of the accident.
The data lets investigators fly the exact same flight, the same speeds, same climb rate, and 37 seconds into the flight, the same cockpit alarm.
Master warning, engine 2 flame out.
The plane's computer instantly identifies which engine has lost thrust.
Check, autopilot armed, run the checklist.
The automated checklist pops up, clear, concise, and easy to follow.
Up trim on engine 1, auto feather on number 2.
Check.
Engine 2 flame out confirmed.
Confirmed. Secure engine number 2.
The checklist calls for the pilot monitoring to reduce power in the feathered engine to idle. The other pilot guards the working engine.
Then you would bring the condition lever into the fuel shutoff détente, which removes fuel from the engine.
Condition lever to fuel shut off.
Check.
And then the engine will be secured and shut down.
Engine number 2 secured.
Now powered by just one engine, the plane keeps climbing safely on autopilot. The computerized systems have helped the pilots avoid disaster exactly as designed.
It's quite manageable. The crew can continue the flight, climb to a safe altitude, reconsider their options.
Now we just have to fly back to the airport and land. I have an idea. Let's see what happens if we just let the plane fly itself. Reset from the start.
Setting?
When we do the simulator test, we try to find out what will happen if the pilot do nothing.
Incredibly, the simulation shows that even if there had been no pilot input at all, the plane would not have crashed.
The aircraft will continue climb and fly with no problem. So I think that the aircraft was designed to handle that situation as long as we don't do anything wrong.
Any doubts about the glass cockpit have now been erased. The
Such a
advanced
shitty
systems
thing.
of the ATR 72-600 did
If you do
not
correct
lead to the
thing,
crash of Flight
you're gonna be
235.
okay. If you do nothing, you're
There
gonna
must
be
have been
okay.
some other factor
End up
at play.
doing all the wrong things.
Investigators
What
studied
did you do?
reports from previous incidents
Oh, not me.
where
I'm
similar
talking about the
mistakes were
video.
made.
The in-flight
They
video.
suggest an intriguing possibility.
I mean,
I'm in the kitchen, can't see. Also, the sound is so low I can't really hear it anyway.
Investigators know the captain's workload
I mean, the
was high.
pilots basically,
Taking manual control of the plane distracted him from
if they
running
didn't do
cross-check with
anything,
his
they
first
would have been
officer.
fine.
He's multitasking.
If they did things the way that they were supposed to do, they would have also been fine. But they did just
He
the
could have
wrong
been
things.
suffering from change blindness.
Change blindness. People are focused or fixated on another item or area of interest, and so they miss what would be considered a very distinguishable change in the environment, but they don't perceive it.
I will pull back engine 1 throttle.
Even when all the systems were telling him it was engine 2, his perception told him he was doing the
Isn't
right
that
thing.
kind of like what
Change
happens
blindness.
when you do wrong things?
Yeah, but normally
The first officer even tried to warn him.
What's the
No, wait a
word?
second. Cross-check.
It seems the captain
Like-
was blind to the clear warning that his right engine
Normally
had
when you
feathered.
don't have any input in the situation, it gets worse.
Investigators
this
finally
airplane was
understand what went wrong aboard TransAsia
designed
Flight
so well
235.
that even if you didn't do anything, it would have
A
saved itself.
microscopic crack in a
Anyways.
circuit board disabled an engine sensor that led the system to wrongly determine that
But
the right engine had failed.
They didn't do the correct thing, a correct
But
procedure,
that in itself
and
wouldn't
they
have
didn't
caused
leave the
plane to
airplane
crash.
alone.
This was a series of mistakes on the part of the captain. When engine 2 feathered, the captain reacted before he had properly assessed the situation.
So basically, it wasn't broken, and they shouldn't have meddled.
I mean,
The captain
there was
should have
a
followed a
fire in
checklist.
the engine, but they
I have control.
feathered the engine.
Instead,
Like,
he turned off the
the
autopilot.
engine fire
reduced power
was
in the
gone
wrong
already,
engine.
but instead of turning
back
the
engine 1, throttle.
fire, like burnt engine down, he accidentally turned
All we
the
know for sure is
working
he shut
engine
their only
down.
working engine. By the time he realized,
That's a mistake even I wouldn't do.
it's too late.
I'm not even a real pilot.
Restart the engine.
I can't restart the engine.
Wow. I shut off the wrong engine.
No shit, Sherlock.
Why did TransAsia hire this pilot?
Investigators dig into TransAsia's corporate background,
Check this out.
trying to understand how a pilot with such a poor record ever got through the door.
And this?
This company's been expanding rapidly.
What they find paints a picture of a growing company struggling to compete with bigger players in the competitive Asian market.
A more regional operator like TransAsia Airways appears to have struggled
there's a
to
maintenance in the
certainly recruit and retain the sort of expertise that airlines seek.
The crash of Flight 235 would be the last accident for TransAsia Airlines. In November 2016, the company ceased operations and went out of business.
There's a multitude of reasons that the board decided to shut down the airline, but there's an inescapable conclusion that the adverse or poor safety performance of the airline certainly had an economic impact on the airline.
Even though TransAsia Airlines no longer flies, air crash investigators hope that the tragedy of Flight 235 will serve as an important safety reminder to pilots at other airlines around the world.
We all understand that pilots, they're human. Humans make mistakes. So that's why we design the standard operating procedures. And the basic important thing is for people just follow the procedure.
That's just sad. Like, it's tragic when it's airplane failure, but it's even worse when it's pilot error.
A regular commercial flight to an extraordinary part of the world.
A lot of tourists fly in just for scenery.
Thai Airways 311 is bound for Kathmandu, but it never arrives.
Thai 311, Kathmandu. Please report your position.
Until the airplane is found, it's difficult to figure out what might have happened. This is where we search.
A high-altitude trek leads investigators to one of the most remote places on Earth.
You couldn't tell that you had an Airbus A310 aircraft there. You couldn't even tell you had two engines.
How can they ever hope to piece together what happened?
Right away, you knew you were really going to be in a difficult situation.
It is midsummer in the Himalayas. Monsoon season, when shifting winds and sudden rains sweep across the jagged mountain landscape. Just above the awesome peaks flies Thai Airways Flight 311. The pilot flying is Captain Prida Sutimai. His first officer is Phunphat Bunyaye.
I will never get tired of seeing these mountains.
It truly is an extraordinary sight, brother.
The flight's 99 passengers are a mix of Nepalese nationals and international tourists, all headed to Kathmandu.
Kathmandu is a popular tourist destination. It's a mountainous airport, and a lot of tourists fly in just for that, for the scenery.
The Thai Airways plane is an Airbus A310, a medium to long-range twin jet.
The A310 overall is a fantastic airplane. It has a range of 8 hours, and it can carry 20 tons at a decent altitude.
The flight from Bangkok to Kathmandu is expected to take roughly 3.5 hours. The Nepalese capital lies at more than 4,500 feet above sea level. The approach requires navigating near some of the world's highest mountains.
Kathmandu, Thai 311, request descent. Kathmandu, Thai 311, do you read?
The first attempts that the flight crew had with air traffic control, they called 3 times and got no response at all.
Kathmandu, Thai 311. Do you read?
The acoustics were not very good. There was a lot of echoing on the frequencies. Maybe it had been caused by the mountains.
Kathmandu, Thai 311. 311, Kathmandu, go ahead.
Finally, the Nepalese controller hears the call.
Request descent. Thai 311, have negative traffic at or above flight level 150 within our jurisdiction. Except Royal Nepal at 206. You are cleared for descent.
The controller, he was relatively inexperienced. He had 9 months experience. You know, he's not a complete rookie, but at the same time, he's got a lot to learn yet.
Ladies and gentlemen, we will soon begin our descent into Kathmandu. Please stow away your tray tables, raise your seat backs, and fasten your seatbelts in preparation for landing.
The flight is now about 30 minutes from its destination.
Lots of clouds. Let's go through.
Kathmandu's Tribhuvan International Airport is one of the most challenging in the world. The mountains that tower above the capital force pilots to descend much more steeply than at other airports.
When I look at the approach that the aircraft was going to be flying going into Kathmandu, I'm definitely struck by the steepness of the approach itself and the gradient of the terrain in the area.
Go ahead. Would you request for runway 02, please?
Thai 311, request 02.
Thai 311, confirm requesting 02.
Confirm.
The pilots have requested a straight-in approach from the south to runway 2. It will keep them clear of high mountains north of the airport. But as they get closer, things change.
Thai 311, Kathmandu.
Go ahead, Thai 311.
Thai 311, for your information, runway 02 not available due to poor visibility and heavy rain toward that side. You'll have to take runway 20.
Sudden bad weather means the only approach now available is from the north. It requires circling north of the airport to land on the opposite runway, a maneuver the captain does not want to make.
We need a runway 02 for the straight-in approach.
You would be challenged at the notion doing a circling approach in a mountainous environment. It's one thing to do it over an island, say in the sea, without any obstacles. It's another thing to do it surrounded by mountains.
I guess we can't make it, brother. Please check the fuel to Calcutta.
The captain decides to abandon the landing and divert to an airport in India.
Fuel. We got enough to get to Bangkok.
And for Calcutta, how much do we need? 18, 14, 42?
For passengers, diverting to Calcutta would mean landing more than 400 miles away from their destination.
Thai 311, I've just confirmed that runway 02 is now also available. Report 25 DME.
Wait a minute.
It seems the unpredictable weather has changed again. It's good news.
Kathmandu, Thai 311. Confirm runway 02 available?
Confirmed. Runway 02 is now available.
That's lucky.
The straight-in approach from the south is once again clear. But the plane is now too close to the runway to descend safely.
They were a little bit high for the position that they were at in relation to the airport.
Kathmandu, Thai 311, we cannot make approach now. We will need to turn back to Romeo and climb to 8,000 feet and start our approach again.
The captain decides to turn around and try again. It should give him the distance he needs for a safe, controlled descent. Using the flight management system, First Officer Bunyaye looks up a navigational waypoint called Romeo to restart their approach. But there's a problem. The system won't lock in the flight path to Romeo.
Disappeared.
It's Romeo 27, isn't it?
Romeo.
Kathmandu, what is the visibility?
Hi 311, stand by for tower observation and visibility.
Flying in dense cloud, the pilot's view ahead is extremely limited. They want to know when they can expect to see the airport.
Level change.
A ground proximity warning suddenly begins to sound.
Pull up. Pull up. Airspeed low.
Turn back. Turn back.
It's false. It's false.
Terrain. Pull up. Don't sink.
Oh my god. Holy shit.
Please report your position.
What?
Are you still in kitchen?
Please report your position.
No, I'm back in front of the computer, but I still
the
can't hear
mountains of
your
Nepal,
in-flight movie.
A search is underway for Thai Airways Flight 311. The
How is it
Airbus
possible the
carrying
desktop audio
113 people
meter is on the
vanished on approach
red
to
one?
Kathmandu. Nepal has moved quickly to
Well,
set up a royal
it's
commission of
kind
investigators.
of low, and I also turned it down a
the
bit
airport.
because Discord is on the stream, so I don't want the voices to overlap
Until the airplane
when
is
my
found, it's
microphone is on.
difficult to figure out what might have happened. This is where we search.
They search an area covering dozens of square miles to the south of Kathmandu.
And the search course started in the south because it came in from the south.
A methodical search eliminates territory, sector by sector.
Where is this thing?
The plane is nowhere to be found. Time is of the
Beautiful
essence.
scenery.
The unpredictable Himalayan weather could bring heavy rains at any moment, making the search all but impossible. As the mountain search continues, investigators interview air traffic control, hoping for any kind of lead.
We don't have radar here, so can't help you with the airplane's location.
A radar is a line of sight tool. It doesn't penetrate through mountains or anything like that. So in a mountainous area like Kathmandu, your radar coverage would be limited to some degree because it would be blocked by the mountains themselves.
I just rely on what the pilots tell me.
In a non-radar environment, they have a mental picture, and that picture is really painted by the words that the pilot reports to them. They don't have an exact location. It's almost like working blindfolded.
They were going to restart their approach. Their last reported position was here, 14 miles to the south of the airport.
Hello.
How did you like Sundsvall?
We cannot make approach now. We will
How did I
turn back
like
to
what?
Romeo and climb to 8,000 feet.
Oh, that was a
to start
beautiful
our
little
approach
airport.
again.
But it was a little tricky because there is no taxiway.
There was one thing.
So if you need to taxi, you actually have to go on the runway.
A few seconds later, they said
Go to the end of it and then turn the aircraft around.
Fault raises
Yeah.
suspicion.
It's a bit
But at this
tricky.
point, there's no way of knowing if it played any
So,
role in the plane's disappearance.
Instead of doing that,
They
I
knew the
took
aircraft
a
had some
risk
technical
and
problem, that's what they were told.
took
They
off
didn't know
from
whether it
half
was
of the
a radio
runway.
fault,
When
an
I
ignition
actually
system
like
fault. So we wondered what
took
it was.
off and like left contact with the ground,
It's
I
been
was like
almost
2
48
meters or so
hours
away
since
from the
Thai
end of the
Airways
runway.
Flight 311 disappeared in the Himalayas. Investigators
If
have
I
yet
did
to
that in
find
real
the
life,
aircraft.
I would have been sacked in like 15
Now,
minutes.
they're about to get an important break.
From the airport, from the airline.
Local villagers report
There's
that they
actually a
found
road
aircraft debris
going
north of Kathmandu.
very close to that end of the
Some
rail.
people where the airplane crashed had heard about
Oh
it.
yeah, I actually, while I was
And they couldn't
landing,
communicate
I
with
didn't
anybody
see
as to where it
that.
went, 'cause they just didn't have the means to do so.
I actually recorded that landing. I'm going to show you.
To the south of the
I missed the. It's kind of like a bridge, right? Like almost like a bridge road, like a little high up. I missed that road by like a couple meters because I didn't see it.
The airplane was north of the airport.
North of Kathmandu, near the border with Tibet.
I was so sure that I was gonna hit it with my landing gear.
These northern summits are the reason almost all planes
It was
approach
the most
Verhoeven
difficult
Airport from
landing,
the south,
like not
where
difficult
the
like
mountains are closer to 8,000 feet.
pilotage wise, but like stress wise.
Send out the helicopters. Tell them to start searching to the north of the airport.
Yeah, it's usually
Later
smaller
that day,
aircraft that lands
27
there.
miles
Oh yeah,
north of
I
Kathmandu,
understand that
search
perfectly.
crews find the remains of Thai Airways Flight 311. The point of impact is a steep rock face more than 11,000 feet up the side of a remote mountain.
It hit essentially a vertical rock face. And
We
then the
have an
whole
even
aircraft just
smaller
tumbled down
airport
into
that is a
valley.
bit closer to
There
me,
was some
but
small
I
evidence
figured
of
that
fire, but
since
mostly
that
just
one is
total
at least
destruction of the
international.
None of the 115
Yeah, any smaller
people
runway than that, I would
survived.
probably end up in like mountains or
It
something.
created some mystery as to what might have happened, why the airplane got to a place that was not expected.
I knew that
The
the
challenge for
airport was small,
investigators
so
is
I
unlike anything they've encountered
approached
before.
really low.
The terrain
That's why
is
I
so
almost
extreme,
hit the
helicopters can't
commercial
land
road
near the impact
before.
zone. The team will have to trek more than 3,000 feet up from the base camp to reach the wreckage.
You know, the crafting the motive book
It's a
has sold.
treacherous 5-hour.
Really? For how much?
Yeah, 2.8 million.
Damn, nice. A lot of
This is a
portions
dangerous
then.
area. You have to be very, very careful.
Yes.
Ah, you can pay back the million.
End up with
Oh, yep.
hypoxia.
I have already put 400k in Black and Tan Guild.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
It isn't long before
I have
the mountains let it be known just
some
how dangerous they can be.
couples
What's going on?
stacks of
One of the
motifs that I
investigators
was waiting to send to you, so that like whenever you log
A
back
British
in.
investigator for Airbus suffers fatal
I have
complications from
also
hypoxemia,
refilled
a
with
lack of oxygen in the
tripods
blood
and
due to thin
sugar
air
skulls.
at high altitude.
Ah, nice. Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's bad enough that people die in the accident, but you don't want other people dying trying to solve the accident or recover things from the accident site. And so that was a shock.
It's now brutally clear to everyone. On this mission, the stakes could not be higher. Deep in the Himalayan mountains, Nepal's Accident Investigation Commission makes its way towards the Thai Airways crash site. The team includes experts from around the world, including Canada's David Raw.
You're there to hopefully find something to prevent recurrence, to save somebody else from having that same tragedy in their lives or have a similar outcome. That's why you're there.
Raw is confronted with a scene of total devastation.
The level of destruction was enormous. You couldn't tell that you had an Airbus A310 aircraft there. I mean, you couldn't even tell you had two engines.
The first big question they have is, how did Thai Airways Flight 311 end up here? The Airbus should never have been flying north of the airport. Searchers soon find the cockpit voice recorder, but that won't reveal the flight path. Investigators already know the airport has no radar data. Their best chance of discovering how the plane reached this fatal impact zone is to find the flight data recorder.
Contact Copenhagen Center. Damn, I almost missed the
if you didn't have
handoff.
FDR, then you were really going
I was
to be
too
in a
caught up
difficult
with the video.
situation in terms of trying to determine cause or probable factors.
Still no sign of the FDR?
No. Unfortunately not.
The intensive high-altitude effort has already killed one
They would
team
have
member.
terminated the
Investigators know that their time
radar
on the mountain
contacts
will be
with
limited.
me, so I would have to file the IFR destination file again.
An airport hangar in Kathmandu is the
normal
final
cases,
stop
in
on
real
a long
life,
journey
I would
for
have seen
wreckage
2
collected from the
F-18s on
mountainside.
both sides of my plane.
Ah, right, yeah.
That
was the one I was
pieces that
curious
we
about.
identified
Yep.
down to the landing zone. Then the Nepalese army and their helicopters would put them in nets
Is
and
that
then
a
sling them
smile
down
wave
to the hangar
situation?
at the airport.
I hope not.
With still no word on the plane's flight data recorder, investigators review the A310's
I mean, I can't really
maintenance
use the
records.
excuse in real life, like, oh sorry, I was watching an in-flight
you don't
video.
just sit and wait for the recorders. You start doing work right away. For example, were there any problems with the aircraft before the accident?
They already know that the Thai Airways pilots reported an unknown technical fault to air traffic control.
It's a red flag, and there's so many different areas that could be called a technical fault. You know, was it a configuration issue? Was it a power issue? Was it a landing gear issue? It just opens up Pandora's box of what it can be.
Hey, look at this. The day before the flight, there was a circuit breaker failure on the plane.
There was a recurring problem with the XP205 bus, and that bus was related to navigation equipment, so we were kind of thinking, well, perhaps we better look at that in more detail.
The XP205 bus carries electrical power to several important systems, including the plane's navigation system.
Maybe the bus failed while they were in flight.
It's possible.
A malfunction in the navigation system could explain the location of the crash.
If that bus failed, would wipe out the co-pilot's electric instruments, which would show his position and his navigation. That would be pretty critical.
But in order to prove their theory, they'll have to track down the XP205 bus amidst piles of burnt and twisted debris.
It's hard to tell what we're even looking at here.
Given the destruction of the aircraft, it's very difficult to track down those types of technical issues.
As team members comb through the wreckage, the investigation takes an unexpected turn.
Why don't I have that in game, by the way? The 2 F-18 shows up. That would have been cool.
Excuse me. Can I help you?
During the investigation,
Technically that exists in multiplayer, but
circuit board,
in actual simulator I don't think they simulated it.
The unusual request leads to an incredible find.
And in multiplayer, is it actually people flying the F-18 or is it automatic?
Yes.
That's when we actually
the closest airport dispatches people with F-18s that are waiting on the runway, like
on the plane's
real
speed,
people.
direction, and altitude throughout the flight.
You always hope that
To intercept the
luck is on your
flight.
side, that things will happen to your benefit, and those are the kind of moments you really hope for as an investigator.
It's the breakthrough they've been waiting
I know that there is
evidence that could reveal how a
airport
plane
nearby
flying
where I
south of
live
the
where
airport
they are flying
ended
the
up
F-18s.
slamming into mountains to its north.
A military?
Ready?
Or
Yes.
okay.
Okay. Start it up.
I mean, I think that was a stupid question. What would an F-18 do in a civilian airport?
Lots of clouds. Let's go through.
It would have been cool.
Investigators hope to
I
hear
mean,
a
that
secret
definitely
might
would have
help
been
explain
amazing to
why
watch,
the
but
Airbus hit a mountain at over 11,000 feet.
Thai 311 Kathmandu.
Go ahead. Would you request for runway 02, please?
Thai
It would have been
311
kind of cool to own.
02.
An F-18, a tank, and a couple of more things while you're already on it.
As
Yeah,
they
you are just
initiate the
taxiing
descent,
to the
all
runway and
seems
then
normal.
the tank just runs past you.
I guess
Like
we
nothing
can
happens.
brother. Please check the fuel to Calcutta.
I mean,
But
with
as
the
the
tanks,
captain
you don't
considers
have to take the
diverting to
roads.
Calcutta, the atmosphere in the cockpit seems to change.
Run!
We got enough to get back to Bangkok.
And Port
Captain, we
Calcutta.
have approximately 2 minutes to take off before we are blown to pieces.
He's really
There
getting
is a tree.
frustrated with his
There
first
was a
officer.
tree.
There was a tree.
I got the impression that the answers from the first officer were not what the captain was looking for. They
Where's the
weren't
runway?
communicating properly with each
It
other.
was here like a minute ago.
Type 311, I've just confirmed that runway 0.
I see a cornfield close by.
Report 25 DME.
Wait a minute. Kathmandu Thai 311. Confirm runway 02 available?
Investigators then notice something else out of the ordinary.
Confirmed. Runway 02 is now available.
Request surface condition, please.
Wait a minute.
At one point, I wanted to practice emergency
The pilot on the
landing
radio
and
is
fly
not the
simulator.
first officer.
It's the captain.
Told myself
Why is
that
the captain
let's
speaking
bring
into
some realism in this
As the
shit.
pilot flying, the captain should never have
I
been
started with
speaking
something
air
very
traffic control.
It's up to the first
small,
officer
like
as a
really
non-flying
minor,
pilot
like
to do the communication.
just an engine failure, no fire or
But it
something.
didn't
Like
unfold
the
that
engine
way.
basically shuts down because of an unknown
Normally, division
reason.
of duties in a cockpit is very
And you just
important
need
in sharing
to
workload.
basically keep the
But
airplane
in this
stable
case,
with
I
other
noticed that
engine
the
while
captain
trying to
was,
like
in many cases, taking over the radio transmission.
turn the
work.
other engine back on. And since I wanted actual realism, I didn't know when it was gonna hit.
Speed brake in. Flap.
I was just chilling,
15 selected.
and then BAM!
As they keep listening, they
The
hear the
engine
captain's
went off.
frustration grow.
It took me
Damn it.
approximately
The flaps won't be
15
extended.
minutes to get the other
The
engine
flaps would not extend to
to
full
back on
configuration,
like track.
which for the Kathmandu approach
That
is
was,
essential.
without a doubt, the most like crushing 15 minutes of my life. After
It's too
that,
late
I
to
never
make a landing.
dared again.
It's too late.
We can request a return.
Damn it.
I have
Kathmandu,
utmost
Thai
respect for actual
311.
pilots that are
Request to
like
maintain
training for this thing day
10,500.
and night.
And request to go back to Calcutta?
They must have nerves of steel.
It's now clear that the technical problem has nothing to do with a circuit breaker. It's the wing flaps.
If
They
any
won't
real-life
extend to 15
pilots
degrees.
happens
went
to
to
watch
15
this
and
stream or
15,
this video
of course, they
afterwards,
didn't
I
get
salute you,
15
sir.
and 15, they got the
Bravo,
wing chime,
Charlie.
And they had a flap fault.
But just how serious a problem is it? Will
You
it
know,
affect
that
the captain's
band
ability
that
to
you
control his
linked,
plane?
From what I can see, it's already done in 2015.
Yeah, I didn't know until now.
Ah,
The
Mhm.
I
flaps
thought
have
it was something
extended.
new.
The recording soon tells them that the flap issue is quickly resolved.
They did cycle the flaps. They did correct the problem.
4 years later, hooray!
Hooray!
Can we make a left turn to Romeo?
I mean, honestly,
Understand operation.
unless there are some people that are actually taking interest in
The
going and
situation appears to be
like researching
stabilizing.
what's happening on that part of the world, we can never know what happens.
Report 10 DME.
Mm.
Leaving
It's a shitty
9,500.
thing.
But the captain's frustration soon
To be honest, I
returns.
think that I have seen the news about it before. It's just that
We have to make a left turn back
there
to
are so
Romeo and
many
start our approach again.
places that needs to be better and many places that have been better
Communication
that
with
I can't
ATC
keep track.
was anything but great. It was fragmented. It was unclear.
Type 311, go ahead, your DME distance.
We are 9 DME, 10,500 feet. Answer, please. Answer, please.
Repeated requests to return to Romeo were pretty much unanswered.
Investigators now wonder,
Kathmandu Thai 311, can we make our left turn back now?
does the Thai Airways crew keep flying towards the mountains because they don't have clearance to change course?
We'll climb and turn to the right.
Oh, adorable.
But despite lacking clearance, the
He's an
captain takes
18-year-old,
matters
very
into his own
cute, and he
hands
having his
and turns his
profile.
plane right,
Can you help me
heading back to the start of the
forget my
approach.
ex?
Oh, poor thing. It's never gonna help.
Cute pie.
They're all gone.
Oh.
They've disappeared.
Moments later, there is more uncertainty in the cockpit.
It's Romeo 27.
It kind of depends on how it ended though. Like for example, my Italian ex ended so badly.
Also,
after 3-4 years, I'm still having nightmares sometimes.
Put things in the navigation system.
Because it's like it ended so the really like the worst time possible,
This thing failed again.
the worst way possible.
Why are you having such a hard time inputting the waypoint?
Then, investigators hear a surprising question from the first officer.
I'm the kind of person that I don't forget them.
Are we going
If
north?
I actually love someone, I will always love them. It's with
The
just
co-pilot
come
said
less.
something like, "We're going north, huh?" In that with that inflection, like it's a mitigating type question.
The recording presents a troubling contradiction. Though clearly frustrated with air traffic control and with his co-pilot, it seems the captain managed to turn south away from the mountains. Yet minutes later, they hit a wall to the north.
Terrain. Pull up. Turn back. It's false.
How they ended up slamming into a mountain they were supposed to be flying away from remains a mystery.
Terrain. Pull up. Oh my God!
In Nepal, investigators have ruled out the possibility that a faulty circuit breaker caused the Thai Airways 311 disaster.
Had the XP205 bus failed, it would have fired off some warning chimes, which I'm sure they would have talked about, which they didn't. And so I think that was probably the main reason we discounted it as a factor.
They wonder if the work records of the two Thai Airways pilots can shed any new light on the investigation. The captain's record reveals he was a highly trained pilot who had flown to Kathmandu many times.
He was impressive, and I think everybody in the company had identified him as a person who was going to go right to the senior levels of the company.
The co-pilot was older than the captain, had a lot of experience as well.
First officer's flown into Kathmandu 14 times in the last year.
But as investigators look more deeply into the first officer's record, they make a surprising discovery.
Thai Airways, they categorized you based on whether you were going to be captain material or whether you were going to be first officer material only. Interestingly enough, in their assessment, they categorized for the first officer in this case that he would not be captain. I've always thought that if you tell somebody you're limited, I will hire you, but you're limited, well, maybe they'll fulfill that prophecy.
Still doesn't explain how they ended up way up here to the north.
Flight 311 flew 27 miles north of the airport, into airspace commercial airliners normally avoid at all cost.
Is that the data from the FDR? Great.
With the FDR data now recovered, investigators have their first chance to analyze the plane's deadly flight path.
Because recorders will give you latitude and longitude, gives you a nice track as to where the airplane went.
First, let's have a look at what they were intending to do. Can you pass me the published approach?
Thai Airways' approach to Kathmandu is from the south. The crew wanted to land on runway 2.
Okay, roughly here is where they would have decided on the missed approach. This is where they were supposed to go. Let's see what they actually did.
The data shows Flight 311 proceeding north towards Kathmandu. Everything seems to be in order.
And right here, they're looping around to restart their approach, right? All right. They were supposed to level out. They just kept turning.
Instead of straightening out and heading to Romeo, Flight 311 does a complete 360-degree turn.
When I saw it, I was, I was amazed, because I couldn't understand why they would want to do that.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Why the Airbus flew in a complete circle, back on a collision course with mountains north of the airport, is a mystery investigators must solve in order to understand why 113 people died aboard the Thai Airways flight.
Ready? Ready. Fire it up.
In search of answers, they turn to a flight simulator.
In terms of simulator testing, the one thing that it allows the investigators to do is to replicate what happened and understand what the crew would see or any other problems that they would face.
The captain just took over communications with the controller.
Yeah, okay.
Kathmandu, Thai 311, confirm.
Where are
Runway
you at the
02
moment?
available?
At this point, the captain is flying the aircraft, monitoring the instruments, and speaking to the controller, all on one of the steepest, most difficult descents in aviation.
Speed break in. Flap 15.
Choose an option for Copenhagen Center.
Flap 15 selected.
I'm above, like, Denmark. Yes, I'm above Denmark right now.
The flap issue is temporary, but time spent resolving it forces a delay. They can no
So
longer
is that
make
the
the
same one
straight-in
that you need
landing.
to reply to?
Okay, no.
What's the same one?
Too high
Is
and
that
too
another
close
one
for
that
the
you need to
approach.
reply to? Choose
choice
an
is to circle
option.
back
No,
and
no, no.
do
That's
another
just
approach.
like these are the options that I can take. Like if there's any situation.
Altitude and distance from
Ah,
the
okay,
airport.
okay.
Let's say that my ICIS system went off. I'm on a collision course with another airplane. I can ask for altitude increase or decrease.
Selected heading in the shortest way
There's a situation in the
this
cabin
case, that would mean turning to the left.
or in the flight, like instruments, like any kind of emergency mayday situation. I can choose a new IFR destination to closer airport. Or I want to go and bomb some
Needing to
towers,
turn
I can
before he
cancel
reaches the
IFR.
mountains north of Kathmandu, and with traffic on his left, the
If I
captain
want to
decides
cancel
to override the
IFR
autopilot.
and bomb some towers, I also have to turn this off,
He
transponder.
can turn
This
right
is
by
basically
turning the
how
heading
they know
knob
where I am on
incrementally
the
in
radar
same
screen.
direction.
Just some little info in case you decide to become a terrorist one day.
The airplane was
You need to
turned
know that kind of
by
stuff.
changing the heading bug. In other words, the captain
Robin's
has that
full
option.
of
He just turns
terrorism.
a heading and the airplane will turn.
But it's,
Watch your turn,
I
you're starting to
guess
level
it's
off.
vital to know as well, because in case you actually overcome the terrorists, you need to be able to activate it again as well.
Oh yes, definitely. I'm 100% convinced that every single person that is going to fly, for example, frequently should know at least a little bit of how an airplane works.
Due to traffic in the area.
At the very least, know the basics, like the transponder or the radio communication.
You know what?
Know the difference between VFR and IFR. Even if you don't know how to operate them, know the difference between them.
That eventually, you know, the monkey climbed.
You don't
on
have
his
to be
back,
like
and he took on
commercial
the whole load of the
pilots
operation.
to know
Investigators
like,
are
very
close to a
basic things.
breakthrough.
And this is the moment they should have stopped adjusting the heading.
So, worst situation ever.
The simulation gives them a
flight
sense of the
attendant
mounting
goes
pressure in the Thai
Is
Airways
there a
cockpit.
pilot on the plane?
An extremely
no one
busy
stands up.
captain flying a challenging approach attempts an improvised right turn.
He's trying to do too many things at once. He's asking to go to a point. He's trying to fly the airplane on the autopilot. And he's
There was
starting
actually
to
one
lose
situation
the
in
3D picture that he has in
one of
his
the
head
flights
where
that
he is.
the
Without
pilots
realizing
lose
it,
all
he turns the heading knob too far.
hydraulics to the elevators and the like pitch, for yaw, for turning everything, all elevate, all hydraulics gone. There is no control.
Each time he has to reach up and
So
change
they
the
have
heading.
to, yeah, that's very bad. They have to turn the airplane only by increasing and decreasing the throttle.
Each time he reaches up to select a different button,
Throttle on the yeah, exactly. While they are wrestling with the flights to get at least a little bit of a control, which is completely like redundant. There's no way. There are no hydraulics. Like, nothing. Cannot like turn. No. And to their luck, there was among the passengers, there was
After he did the turn,
the airplane that they were flying was DC-10. Among the passengers, there was the guy that was a DC-10 trainer pilot. His job was to train people to fly DC-10. That's how they landed the airplane and saved like maybe 90% of the people's lives.
Why 90?
Because they, like, with the very limited control, they couldn't line up with the airport. They crashed on the runway, they went off, and then the airplane, like, basically disassembled into 4 pieces.
Why did they ignore those cues? Take a look at this.
I can probably find that video, actually. That's a very interesting one. That's the first time they introduced the captain of a flight is not the absolute authority.
Why?
Because before that, if the captain wanted to do something, you wouldn't be able to overturn his decision.
Yeah.
Because of that, there were so many accidents happened.
Oh?
Because like the captain, you know, like it's one thing to have only one person's opinion, one person's observation and experience. It's another thing to have 3 people's observations and opinions.
Yeah, but I mean, like, even if the captain is the one that have the final say, usually they do listen to advice to those around them since they also have experience.
Yep. Before that flight, that specific flight, that wasn't the case. After that, they said like, okay, there will have to be like advice from everybody in the flight. Like first officer, for example, is has a chance to overturn the captain's decision if captain is doing something wrong. Ah, there we go. I think I found
Colorado. Denver. Stapleton Airport. July 19th, 1989. Known as the gateway to the Rockies, Denver is the starting point for journeys all over the U.S. 1,300 planes take off from here every day, carrying over 75,000 passengers. It's the peak of the summer season, and Stapleton is packed with vacationers and business travelers. Debbie McKelvey will be among the vacationers flying from Stapleton today. She's taking her children, Devon, age 6, and her son Ryan, who's 7, to a family reunion back in her home state of Pennsylvania.
I was going home for 2 weeks with my children, and I was very, very excited about the trip.
Debbie is taking advantage of United Airlines Children's Day promotion. Today, kids under 14 can fly for 1 cent, but each must fly with a paying adult. Debbie pairs up with a tennis club girlfriend, Ruth Ness, so she can sit with one of the kids.
It was nice having Ruth with me because she entertained one child while I was entertaining the other child.
1:15 p.m. Debbie, Ruth, and the kids wait to board flight UA 232 to Philadelphia via Chicago. Commanding the flight is Captain Alfred C. Haynes. His cabin staff reported a minor electrical fault in the galley on the previous leg, but engineers have given it the all clear. Captain Haynes is a veteran pilot with 7,190 hours logged in the DC-10. The passengers will be in safe hands today.
The DC-10 is a great airplane to fly. I think it was termed an old man's airplane because it's so simple to fly.
At this time in the late 1980s, there are over 400 DC-10s in service. But it's a plane with a troubled history. Windsor, Ontario, 1972. A cargo door blows out on a year-old DC-10, causing severe decompression. The pilots managed to land the plane safely. 2 years later, a door comes off a Turkish Airlines DC-10 flying out of Paris. This time, the violent decompression tears the plane apart in midair. All 346 people on board die. McDonnell Douglas finds the fault and fixes it. But the reputation of the DC-10 never fully recovers. The DC-10 making flight 232 today is in its 17th year of service and has flown over 43,000 hours. So far, without incident. Today should be no different. Jerry Schemmel is Deputy Commissioner
How long
of the
is, by the way,
Basketball Association
delay on the
and a
stream?
frequent flyer.
Not long at all.
I was never a nervous flyer. I always kind of enjoyed
How many
flying.
seconds
I
would
took my
you
first flight at age 18.
say?
I always enjoyed it.
Jerry is flying to Columbus on business with his boss and great
9, 10
friend
seconds.
Jay Ramsdell.
7, 8, I counted.
Their original flight is
okay.
cancelled, but
Not
Jay
bad.
gets a seat on the very next flight. The bad news is there's no seat for Jerry. Jay decides to stay with his buddy and wait for an even later plane.
I didn't think much of it at that time. I thought it was a nice gesture.
And I don't see any
thought to
frame
myself,
drops or
I hope
anything,
I would
so
have
the
same
quality
thing.
should be okay.
Quality is amazing.
Finally, after a 6.5-hour wait,
But there's
Jerry
like
and
not a
Jay
lot of
both get
action.
seats
Nope.
on flight UA232
Physics is
to
like, I
Philadelphia.
don't know, 10-year-old program or something.
Flight 232 is busy today. It's carrying 285 passengers and 11
Even a
crew.
toaster can run that simulation.
Debbie McKelvey boards with her friend and 2 kids. They add to an unusually high number of children on board. 52 in total,
Oh,
thanks to the
52
Children's Day
children,
deal.
oh boy.
For senior flight attendant Jan Brown Law, lots of children on board means a busy flight ahead. After a 4-day trip, Jan is excited to be heading home to Chicago.
I just remember feeling just the energy of this last leg and getting all pumped up to do the service.
Captain Haynes, co-pilot Bill Records, and flight engineer Dudley Dvorak run through their pre-flight checks. They taxi out to the runway and await the takeoff clearance. At 2:09 p.m., the 3-engine jet flies out of Denver.
The morning we left Denver, it was clear skies, beautiful day, nice smooth air, comfortable flight. Just a routine flight.
Debbie McKelvey sits with her son Ryan, while her friend Ruth is one row behind, looking after her daughter Devon. At 3:16 p.m., they're finishing their meal. Suddenly, out of the blue, a terrifying blast rips through the plane.
The first thing I thought was a bomb has gone off. I really did. I thought someone had planted a bomb, it had been detonated, and we started to drop.
The only way I can think to explain it, it's like if you're driving down a highway and you hit a pothole.
Jan Brown Law fears it may be a breach in the plane's fuselage.
I instinctively sat down on the floor and held on, not knowing if it were a decompression, that everything that isn't tied down securely is going to be sucked out.
There's no sign of any visible damage inside the plane. But up in the cockpit, Captain Haynes scans the engine instruments and quickly realizes that his number 2 engine is malfunctioning.
I've never had a jet engine fail in flight. Only in the flight simulator, never in flight.
But this time, it's happening for real. 3:17 p.m. Captain Haynes' priority is to shut down the problem engine. He's not too worried. The DC-10 can fly comfortably on its remaining 2 wing-mounted engines. Haynes follows the shutdown procedure and cuts off fuel and power to the number 2 engine. The problem engine is off. But now flight engineer Dudley Dvorak spots something else wrong.
Now we've lost all hydraulic quantity.
His instruments tell him that all 3 of the plane's hydraulic systems are empty. He cannot believe his eyes. The hydraulic systems operate the plane's flaps, ailerons, rudder, and elevator. Without these controls, the pilots won't be able to steer the plane or take it up or down. But the instruments are right.
Al, can you help me out with this?
Co-pilot Bill Records is horrified to find his flight controls are no longer responding. The plane starts to bank steeply to the right, and he's powerless to stop it.
That's when we realized we were in a world of hurt, that something was drastically wrong.
Now Captain Haynes tries the flight controls, but he cannot get the DC-10 back into level flight either. The plane is now trying to roll over, a terrifying prospect.
We have nothing to turn the airplane, nothing to control the pitch of the aircraft. Nothing.
Fly the aircraft.
It's every pilot's nightmare. Flight 232 is at 11,000 meters and out of control. If its left wing continues to lift, the plane will flip over and tumble to its doom. United Airlines Flight 232 is down to 2 engines. Worse still, the plane has lost all conventional flight controls. Despite everything that Captain Haynes tries, the plane seems bent on turning over. Back in the cabin, the passengers feel the plane banking steeply.
Now, my son at 7.5, he had always been a people watcher. And he looked around and he said, something's not right here.
You could feel the turn. You could feel the sensation physically of your body leaning off to the right side. I remember feeling that, thinking that was very unusual.
3:18 p.m. The left wing is so high that the plane is in an extremely steep bank. Al Haynes knows that within a few more seconds, it will roll over and tumble out of control. There is just one old aviator's trick left to him. If it fails, Flight 232 is doomed.
The first reaction was to just close one throttle and push the other one up, see if maybe that would help.
In a desperate bid to restore level flight, Haynes tries adjusting the relative power of the 2 wing engines. If the right engine runs faster, the airplane will bank left, and vice versa. It works. Captain Haynes is able to pull the plane out of its roll. He still has no flight controls, but he regains a crude form of steering by using the throttles. But Haynes finds that he can only make right-hand turns. 3:20 p.m. Co-pilot Bill Records radios Minneapolis Air Route Traffic Control Center. He reports the loss of flight controls and requests a flight path to the nearest airport. The pilots have no idea how they're going to land the crippled plane.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain. We've shut down the number 2 engine.
Now Captain Haynes tells passengers that one engine has failed, but he doesn't mention the loss of flight controls.
Chicago, but we may be just
Not all the passengers find his words reassuring.
You could just feel a tenseness in the flight attendants. And that's when you kind of felt there's something not right here.
Captain Haynes knows that time is running out. UA 232 is dropping at around 250 meters per minute. They need to attempt an emergency landing soon, before they lose height altogether. 3:22. Air traffic control informs the flight crew that their nearest runway is at Sioux Gateway. This is a small regional airport near the sleepy town of Sioux City, Iowa. 3:25 p.m. A quiet afternoon in a Sioux City fire station is about to get a whole lot busier. When Fire Chief Robert Hamilton hears an alert called in, he suspects something big.
I've been in this business a long time, and you can kind of tell. You have almost a sixth sense, I guess.
Within minutes, the fire chief's hunch is proved correct. UA-232 is heading right for his city. 9 fire trucks race out to their emergency positions on one of the runways. Now Captain Haynes and his crew have to work out how they're going to land the plane with barely any controls.
Yeah, Farron,
Before they can make a
anything,
plan,
from
they hit
that
another problem. The DC-10 starts to
sounds so
soar
good.
up and then down in a
No,
random,
nothing.
uncontrollable cycle. For the pilots, it's like riding a roller coaster through the sky.
We had no idea how long we were going to keep that airplane in the sky.
Debbie McKelvey feels the plane's erratic motion and fears for her life.
Here I have a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old. You start praying, if I'm going to die, please make sure we all go and we all go quick.
3:26 p.m. Captain Haynes calls his senior flight attendant up to the cockpit.
When I opened that door, the whole atmosphere hit me. It's the worst crisis possible.
The captain tells Jan to prepare the cabin for an emergency landing.
As I walked through the first class cabin, I just could not look anybody in the eye because I was afraid they'd read the fear in mine.
Denny Fitch is a DC-10 training pilot flying home from an instructor session. He knows that something is wrong and offers his help. 3:29. What Denny finds in the cockpit shocks him.
It was an amazing scene for me because both the pilots were in fact on the controls. Both of them, their tendons in their forearms were raised from effort. Their knuckles were white from grip.
Ministry of Silly Trade.
As an expert training pilot, Denny Fitch is ready for any emergency,
That's a guild
but
name.
he's never seen anything like this before.
I was dumbfounded because it was unheard of. As a matter of fact, there was no procedure for it, having no hydraulics. And the first thought that came to my mind, to be honest, was that I was going to die that afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Captain Haynes now tells his passengers the plane is damaged and they'll be making an emergency landing in Sioux City.
This landing's a little different than you're used to.
296 people could lose their lives. Getting this airplane down without crashing will be the ultimate test of pilot skill. Denny offers to help out any way he can.
I said, Captain, would you want me to do your throttles? And he responded, yes, do that.
Denny takes over on the throttles, the only controls still functioning. They allow him some degree of steering, but the plane is still only able to make right-hand turns.
As far as I'm concerned, he's now the 4th member of the crew because he was willing to step in there and help us any way he could.
3:48. The DC-10 is now 12 minutes from Sioux City Airport, and they're running out of altitude. It's time for the pilots to face an almost unthinkable prospect. In a few minutes, they must attempt to land a 165-ton jet without proper flight controls. The lives of 285 passengers are in their hands. The pilots must now try to line up for the final approach into Sioux City Airport. Denny Fitch will attempt to steer the plane and control its descent, all by adjusting the throttles. What's more, the plane can only make right-hand turns. The plan is to make a series of looping turns and hope that as they come out of their final circuit, they're facing the runway. The odds are stacked against them. At 3:50 p.m., Senior Flight Attendant Jan Brown-Law begins her final safety briefing.
The passengers were right there in the palm of our hand. There, you could have heard a pin drop.
Jan pays special attention to the 4 children too small to have their own seats. Official guidelines are non-specific, but United Airlines procedure at the time is for adults to hold these lap children on the floor during an emergency landing. Jan is anxious about the procedure, but has no option but to follow protocol.
It makes my skin crawl to this day to think that I found myself telling passengers, parents of lap children, to put their child on the floor and hold them down.
As the flight crew near Sioux City, they are only too aware of what's at stake.
You've got 296 lives in your two hands. You literally do. And I've never felt so overwhelmingly, responsible for anything in my life.
With no brakes, the DC-10 will need a long runway. Air traffic control assigns them runway 31 at 2,700 meters. It's the longest at Sioux City. 3:52 p.m. Denny Fitch puts the plane into its final looping turn. He knows the crippled jet would never be able to regain altitude for a second attempt.
This was it. We had to land on that runway. One time, that's all we had.
As they emerge from their final loop, the pilots see a wonderful sight. Sioux City Airport, dead ahead. There's just one problem. It's the wrong runway.
Here we are.
It's the wrong runway.
That's where we're going to go.
Runway 22 is much shorter than runway 31, and it's full of fire trucks.
They line up for the runway. What is the wrong one?
It wasn't until probably a couple of minutes at the most that we had a change in that the runway was actually shifted then from 1331 to runway 22.
3:59. Fire trucks race out of the path of the plunging DC-10.
And so we were basically just kind of scrambling, getting out of the way, if you will, and trying to get to an ideal position for that particular runway.
Captain Haynes orders the passengers into the brace position.
Brace, brace, brace.
The minute we said brace, it was like a breeze going over a field of wheat. Everybody in the cabin disappeared from sight to go into their brace position.
I kept thinking, this is it. And I actually made my son shut the window shade. And I thought, we don't need to see, the end as it's coming.
As the pilots desperately try to line up the airplane with the runway, they realize they're still coming in at 400 kilometers per hour, around 150 kilometers per hour faster than normal. But with no control of the flaps, they cannot slow the descent. The alarm sounds from the ground proximity warning system. They're descending too rapidly. The plane is plunging at 560 meters per minute, over 6 times the normal rate. Down on the ground, a local news crew races into position to cover the crash landing.
Not gonna be pretty.
4 p.m. Just seconds from landing, the nose and right wing drop. If they come in at this angle, the plane could break apart.
And I shoved both the throttles to maximum power, hoping that would result in the nose being pulled up.
Denny Fitch desperately struggles to bring the nose back up, but it's too late. The engines don't respond in time. 4 p.m. and 16 seconds. The plane smashes into the runway.
It just felt like we dropped out of the sky and hit the ground. It wasn't like it was an emergency landing. It was a crash.
I could hear all the screeching metal and noises that you've never heard before and you hope you never hear again.
The right landing gear and wing shear off, spilling fuel and sparking a fire.
I could see fireballs because I guess the plane, it's screeching on the runway. And then that was my next thought. Oh my God, we're gonna burn to death.
The jet careers along the runway on its wing stump for about 600 meters, then breaks apart.
The cockpit had snapped off like a pencil tip, and we became a tumbling 200-mile-an-hour piece of wreckage.
The main section of the fuselage skids further down the runway, rolls over on its back, and comes to a halt at the side of the airfield. The plane is split into 3 main pieces: cockpit, tail section, and middle passenger section. Dozens of surviving passengers flee the burning cabin. Fire trucks and ambulances race to help them. Emergency workers arrive to an horrific scene of dead and injured passengers. Survivors escaping the wreckage scatter through cornfields at the edge of the runway. Debbie and her son Ryan are among them.
I grabbed my son and we started.
Alright, you guys enjoyed the video while I'm doing the
Some of the children
procedure.
and babies held on the floor before landing are missing. The violence of the crash tore them from their parents' grasp.
Perfect timing, huh?
One grief-stricken mother confronts flight attendant Jan Brown-Law.
And she just looked up at me and she said, "You told me to put him on the floor, that it would be all right." And I thought, I'm going to live with those words for the rest of my life.
The child, 23-month-old Evan Zhao, tragically died in the burning jet. In the chaos of the crash, Debbie McKelvey and her son Ryan managed to get out of the wreck. But she can't see 6-year-old daughter Devon anywhere.
So then you
let's
start
run right
really
toward the
thinking,
6
why
right.
didn't I have both of them?
Okay.
And it's just a
1 second.
horrible
I need to
sinking
find
feeling.
36 right.
Jerry Schemmel escapes the cabin unhurt. But now he hears a baby's cries. Despite the choking fumes, he ventures back inside the burning aircraft.
18C.
I didn't think if I go back in, the thing will explode or I might not find my way back out. I just reacted. I heard the cries of baby, and the next thing I know, I'm back inside the aircraft.
As the central cabin section burns, it starts to fill with toxic fumes. Smoke like this can kill in minutes. Parents like Debbie McKelvey fear that their missing children could still be somewhere inside the blazing jet.
36 right, okay. 111.95.
Flight 232 crashes at Sioux City Airport and lies in a smoking ruin at the edge of the runway. Survivors flee the crashed airliner, but a baby's cries draw passenger Jerry Schemmel back inside.
So I finally got right over top of the crying, and I'm feeling around, and there's a baby stuck inside this overhead bin. I just grabbed the baby with one arm and scooped her out of the hole. I got back on my feet, found the opening, just kind of aimed for the sunlight, and shot out the plane the second time.
Jerry's actions probably saved the baby's life. But Debbie McKelvey is desperate. She fears her daughter and friend have not survived the crash.
Alfonso don't agree.
Then, suddenly,
Alfonso
she
thinks I'm
spots a
gonna
face.
crash
It's
and
her
burn.
6-year-old daughter Devon emerging from the
He
smoke.
knows you.
It was the absolute best feeling because she was there and
Okay.
she was okay.
Realis is
While
online.
passengers flee the wreckage, Captain Haynes and the flight crew are trapped in the cockpit.
Switching to navigation. There we go.
The plane's nose has buried itself into the soft earth beside the runway. It's the last place the rescuers reach. They have to use a forklift and cutting equipment to get through the twisted wreckage. It takes 30 minutes to reach the pilots. At 5 p.m., rescuers pull out all 4 pilots, seriously injured, but alive.
As I remember the pat on my chest, and his words to me were, "You're okay, buddy. I'm here. I got you. You're going to be okay." And I felt this tremendous relief.
The flaming wreck of UA-232 burns for over 2 hours. 9 helicopters and 34 ambulances evacuate survivors. Jerry Schemmel's thoughts turn to his buddy, Jay, whom he lost sight of in the crash. Jerry hopes that he might have made it, but as time
No, it
goes
doesn't
by,
matter how much you
he
lick
loses all hope.
and
I had a pretty good hunch 8 hours after the crash, when he didn't show up anywhere, that he wasn't a survivor.
Jay Ramsdell is one of 111 passengers who lose their lives in the crash. One flight attendant is also killed. 11 children are among the dead. Remarkably, 184 people survived the Sioux City crash. But for the pilots of Flight 232, any number of deaths is a tragedy. Training pilot Denny Fitch learns how many died when his wife visits him in hospital.
Why am I lagging all of a sudden?
And she started crying because she realized I didn't know the truth. That in fact 112 people had died behind me. And I saw her cry. I had my answer. And I cried every waking moment for the next 3 days. I just couldn't stop crying. It just so tore my heart out to know that people died behind me. I was ready to die for them, and I didn't want them to die.
An octopus.
Al Haynes and the flight crew are determined that something positive should come out of the tragedy.
I would like to say that this crew, and in fact the entire industry, is dedicated to finding the cause of this accident. So maybe we can never have it happen again.
The National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, dispatches an investigation team to Sioux City. With 427 DC-10s still in service all around the world, they need to find out what happened to the plane, and quickly. Frank Hildrup leads the team, analyzing the aircraft structure.
There's a lot of apprehension and anxiety, of course, that we always go into these things with, and I was fairly new at the time. I had not been with the agency, but for about 9 months.
Hildrup and the NTSB team arrive in Iowa 9 hours after the crash and get straight down to work. The investigators' first priority is to try to recover every piece of the wreckage so that they can reassemble the aircraft. It's a mammoth task.
It was such an immense accident scene that we just knew we had a long.
That's a bit sad that the easiest way to actually get the mudskip or sorrel
The
is
crash
to loot the
scatters
fish
thousands of
nets, not
fragments
to
of
actually
debris
fish.
over a distance of 1 kilometer. Emergency services and the National Guard mobilize hundreds of personnel. They scour every square meter of land around the runway. The tiniest component might tell them what triggered the crash. As investigator Jim Wildey knows only too well.
If you want to understand how the airplane came apart, if you want to understand the interrelationships of various pieces, it is very useful sometimes to put the structure back together.
Investigators interview the 4 pilots to explore the bizarre loss of controls they reported during the flight.
We've lost all hydraulic pressure.
Captain Haynes and the crew confirmed that shortly after the dramatic failure of their number 2 engine, all their hydraulic systems went down. It mystifies investigator Frank Hildrup.
I know personally I wasn't prepared for dealing with an airplane crash where it had lost all of its hydraulics. Extremely unique event and something I personally had never encountered before.
Hydraulics operate all the flight controls on the DC-10. The flaps that help control descent. The elevators that pitch the plane up and down. The rudder that steers it. The ailerons that make it bank. Pressurized fluid inside hydraulic lines operates these mechanical controls. There are 3 separate and independent hydraulic systems. Even if one system is breached, it should not cause the loss of hydraulic fluid in the others. To lose fluid from all 3 systems at once is almost impossible. Experts put the odds at 1 billion to 1. Then, an unexpected find. Farmers 90 kilometers from Sioux City report aircraft wreckage scattered on their land. Investigators examine the debris and find that it includes components from the number 2 hydraulic system in the tail near the failed engine. The team can calculate from the plane's flight path exactly when these parts fell. They discover it happened at 3:16 p.m., the same moment as the loud bang and the engine failure. Everything points to a catastrophic event inside the engine, which then damages the hydraulic systems. They go back to the wrecked plane and examine every millimeter of its hydraulic lines. It's a painstaking process, but it pays off. They find puncture holes in the pressure lines of the plane's other 2 hydraulic systems, and the holes in both sets of pressure lines are near the failed engine.
We determined that all the 3 hydraulic systems had been breached, and that's why the hydraulic fluid was lost, and they lost the ability to really control the airplane.
It's incredible, but true. Something did put all 3 hydraulic systems out of action at exactly the same moment. But the team still has to prove that the number 2 engine caused the damage. They inspect the puncture holes with a scanning electron microscope and find minute traces of titanium. Titanium is used for critical airplane parts because it's tough, yet very light. On the DC-10, the only titanium anywhere near the tail section is inside the number 2 engine.
Shit, sorry. I'm not dead, I'm alive.
The DC-10's number 2 engine, a new clue confirms the team's theory.
Just a headset malfunction.
We learned that a major portion
Which
of
means
the
that
engine
I
in the tail of the airplane
banked my head
missing.
forward too much, so it just came off.
Part is the fan disc, the massive central hub of the engine's fan assembly.
I don't think that's
it's made
banking,
of
though.
titanium.
That's pitch.
Depends on which side you are looking at. If you are looking from profile, it's banking. If you are looking from behind my head, then yeah, it's pitch.
44 minutes from disaster. The loud bang that crew and passengers hear is the 170-kilogram fan disc fracturing. The broken fan disc bursts through the engine housing. The blast fractures a section of the number 2 hydraulic system. But in a piece of catastrophic bad luck, fragments also puncture lines in both remaining systems.
Zero on all 3. I'm sure gauges say 0. All hydraulic quantity down.
42 minutes to go. The plane loses all its flight controls. The tail section is so badly damaged that the plane can only make right-hand turns. And without elevators, the pilots cannot keep the plane on a level flight path through the sky. But the NTSB investigators still don't know what caused the fan disc to fracture. Until they find out, more than 200 other DC-10s
What dating advice would you give your younger self? It would be easier if you were gay.
That is correct.
Yeah.
They must locate and examine the missing pieces of fan disc. Investigators calculate the likely trajectory of the fan disc debris to find out where it might have landed. They narrow it down to a tract of Iowa corn belt, 36 square kilometers in size.
I would consider the search for that fan disc certainly a needle in a haystack type of effort.
Investigators pull out all the stops to find the missing fan disc. They scour the area with 4 helicopters, but find that the 3-meter-high cornstalks conceal everything on the ground. They even deploy infrared cameras to try to locate the pieces. But after weeks of searching, they draw a blank. General Electric, the engine manufacturer, offers members of the public a large reward for the missing fan disc. But there's still no sign of it. 2 months go by, and harvest time comes around. Janice and Dale Sorensen have a 180-hectare farm right in the middle of the search area. Tuesday, October 10th, 1989, and Janice Sorensen is out bringing in the corn.
As I was combining, I felt a little resistance on the front of the combine, and I backed it up and then put it in neutral and got out and looked, and I knew immediately that this was the piece they were looking for.
It's a massive chunk of debris, half buried in the earth. Teams from General Electric and the NTSB race to the Sorensen farm. Dale and Janice help investigators dig out the piece of wreckage. This is the Sorensens' own video footage of their find.
I had a little shovel long, and I went and got the tractor with a loader and put a chain around it and hoisted it up. And then we took it down to the turkey shed, which was not very far away. And we had hot water there, so we washed it off. So it was spick and span.
Investigators quickly confirm that the debris is a major chunk of the missing fan disc from flight UA-232. Then they find another piece nearby. Together, the two parts complete the entire missing fan disc. Janice Sorensen learns that her find could hold the key to the disaster.
I was very emotional about it. I had some tears. It was a combination of the excitement of finding the piece and of the tears for those who'd lost their lives.
One more.
Janice and her husband Dale collect General Electric's $120,000 reward. They give over half the money to charity. The NTSB can now begin the next phase of their investigation. They fly the fractured fan disc to the labs of the engine manufacturer General Electric to find out what could break apart such a robust metal component. Jim Wildy, a metallurgist by training, examines the fan disc, starting with the main fracture line where it broke apart. He spots something branching off it, a fatigue crack 13 millimeters long. It's rare to find metal fatigue in a fan disc. These components are specifically designed to withstand the enormous rotational forces within the engine. Then, at the base of the fatigue crack, Wildy sees a tiny cavity.
The size of it was maximum in any one direction was about 50 thousandths of an inch.
As he scans the cavity more closely, he sees that the metal around it looks discolored. He takes a sample from this suspect area for testing. What he discovers will shock the investigation team and rock the aviation industry to its core. Investigator Jim Wildy examines a tiny cavity in the fractured fan disc from flight UA-232. What he finds stuns him. Around the cavity, there is an impurity in the titanium alloy. It's called a hard alpha inclusion, a brittle defect smaller than a fingernail. Analysis reveals that it was caused by excess nitrogen during the forging of the metal ingot. The fan disc in the DC-10 was made from titanium that harbored a fatal hidden defect. It's the final piece of the puzzle. The NTSB team can now put together the chain of events that left the passengers and crew of flight UA-232 seconds from disaster. As the DC-10's fan disc rotates at 3,800 RPM, the huge stresses initiate a minute crack in the defect. With every flight, it grows fractionally bigger. July 19th, 1989, 44 minutes from disaster. The fan disc has been in service for 15,503 flights over 17 years. crack reaches 13 millimeters in length. The faulty fan disc can no longer cope with the stresses imposed by its rotation. It shears in two. The damage it causes makes the DC-10 virtually unflyable. For the next 40 minutes, the pilots struggle to control the plane. Five minutes to go. Flight 232 comes out of its final turn into Sioux City. 20 seconds. As the plane comes into land, the right wing drops. Disaster strikes. The right wingtip hits the ground, and the DC-10 careers down the runway. A $21 million jet weighing 165 tons is brought down by a tiny metallic floor. For the NTSB investigation team, there's a terrible twist to the tragedy. Investigators discover that United Airlines technicians made a routine inspection of the defective fan disc just 16 months before the crash. They're disturbed. The crack was on the fan disc surface. At the time of the inspection, the crack could have been close to 13 millimeters long.
This disc had been inspected before the accident, and we determined that the crack was of a detectable size, but that it just wasn't detected.
The NTSB report concluded that the crack was probably missed due to human error. The report accepted that United Airlines inspection procedures complied with regulations and were up to industry standard, and cited human factors as an industry-wide problem in engine inspection.
How long until it's time for landing?
In the wake of the Sioux City disaster,
less than 5 minutes.
Upgraded engine inspection
I am just about to, like, in about 2 minutes or so, I'm gonna be lining up for the runway.
The FAA also demanded changes
2,000 feet is basically the last leg of the
Airlines were required
landing.
to add shut-off valves to limit the amount of fluid that can drain
In about
from
3
the
minutes
breach
or
in
so, I'm
hydraulic
going
lines.
to reduce the airspeed to 190,
But today, lab children are still allowed to
between
remain
180 and
unrestrained
190
during
knots.
emergency landings.
And it's as soon as I'm caught by the localizer, like established to the localizer,
Jan Brown Law has
I'm gonna take
campaigned for
over the
all
control
children
of the
to have allocated
airplane,
seats and safety restraints
and we
on
are gonna
airplanes.
land.
She has never forgotten the young boy, Evan Zhao, who lost his life on her watch.
Ah, we are
Evan
below
would be
glide slope.
17
That's
years
fine.
old
That's
today.
fine.
Had he been in a seat.
It's not an issue.
Denny Fitch, Al Haynes, and the other crew members received industry awards
Okay,
for their
I'm about to
extraordinary
receive last
professionalism and valor.
vectors for the
Jerry Schemmel, who now
landing.
has children of his own, will never forget the debt he owes the pilots.
I've thought about those guys every day for 16 years. I don't think we could have been equipped with a better cockpit crew than what we had.
The safety measures triggered by the Sioux City crash transformed aviation safety, not just on the DC-10, but on all passenger airliners. The new rules should ensure that such a bizarre and devastating accident can never happen again.
Okay. Let's reduce to 190 knots. And wait for the landing clearance. on, give me the last vector. Lining up. Come on. Come on, boy. Come on. Come on. If you don't, I'm gonna take matters into my own hands. Come on.
Oh dear.
You are the laziest ATC I've ever seen. Alright, fuck it. I'm turning myself.
Does that happen or not?
No. There's a CRJ that's going to land before me. See, the runway is right in front of us. I'm going to switch from heading to approach, and we are gonna line up with the runway. Bombardier right in front of us, CRJ. By the time they clear the runway, I should be able to land. Otherwise, I will have to turn around. I will need extra vectors, which I dread having from that flight controller. Okay, we have been established. Now the plane is going to turn. Alright, good. Good. Full flaps. Taking the control. Okay, now I'm controlling the airplane. We are lined up perfectly. They're a bit low, so I'm gonna increase power. Alright. About to finish the final touches. Good. Lining up nicely. Glide slope to yellow to red. We are in the correct height. The speed is perfect. I'm going to put the... What? Oh, fuck you. They cancelled my landing.
Why?
I don't know. Ah, shit, there is an airplane in the... on the runway.
Can they do that? Like...
Yes.
They kind of have to do that.
They kind of have to do that, so that's...
No, I meant like... I meant the other plane, like how come they were there?
If they couldn't
get away in time?
Get away in time, yes.
Okay, gotcha.
That's really shitty though, at the last.
Yeah.
Turn
I
right,
should
heading
have seen the plane
140.
earlier. That he wasn't gone.
I was just about to touch down. Now we need to turn around and re-establish.
Are you still first in the queue, or?
I don't know, by the time that I'm turning around and re-establishing, we can land 3 aircrafts.
Ah, right.
I mean, it's better than crashing on the runway and burning, but god damn you, CRJ, why the hell didn't you clear the runway already?
Yeah.
Fucking idiot.
But you are not multiplayer now, are you?
No.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a good simulation to get experience of.
If I catch that pilot of that CRJ, I'm going to strangle that bitch to death. I will have to go left again, turn left to at least like yeah, I just saw that one.
R2D2 playing that other plane. Sorry. I guess he said he didn't mean to. Nah, R2D2 would have made it yet much better.
So much better.
But you never know, he might have got a faulty code inside him or something. Virus or whatever.
Are you gonna give me my left turn vectors, or am I gonna have to do that one by myself also? Thank you. Now the second vector I need. So at least 110.
What are the vectors?
Vectors are the heading numbers that the air traffic controller gives you. Like for example, when you are approaching or when you are taking off, they will give you vectors. Like for example, they will tell you like turn right heading 227 and climb and maintain 9,000, for example. And then you turn. If you don't do the turn, they will keep asking you to expedite your turn. because otherwise you might be on the collision course with another aircraft.
Right.
So they are giving you your vectors according to the airport direction, your lining with the airport, what kind of approach you're having, like ILS or VFR, and the proximity to the other aircraft around you, to the traffic. I'm getting pretty far from airport though, so I need my second vector already.
And that is kind of when you turn around?
Yes. I need to do a full left, like at least 3 more left turns.
And that's simply because there are other planes circulating around, so
yes, so that
you
we
need to
don't
use those numbers to not collide.
Exactly, so that we don't like hit each other in front of the airport. Are you gonna give me an approach, or maybe, you know... or nothing? Just not really concerned with my aircraft?
Well, at least you have fuel.
True.
Here we go. A second 10 slot fence placed.
I can't even make them give me like if that was real air traffic controller, I would have pushed them like give us the vectors. I can't do that to a fucking computer.
Yeah, there should be a button for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Request vectors.
Yep. Yo, ATC, did you forget about us or something? Okay, that's ridiculous. I'm turning around. I always knew the ATC in this game, in this simulator, was a piece of garbage, but I never thought it would be that bad. Turn right heading 245. I hate this ATC. I hate this ATC with all my heart.
I believe you.
I was perfectly lined up. My glide slope was perfect, my speed was perfect, my approach was perfect. I was gonna butter the bread with that runway. I am going to murder you, ATC.
Like sneak up in the tower and just kill them?
No, I'm gonna do it like that Russian guy. There was a air crash way in the way back. Russian aircraft collided with DHL cargo plane in midair over Germany. And the guy whose wife and child died in the accident found the ATC in his home and knifed him.
Wow. Oh, no grudges, huh?
He served 7 years in Swiss prison. Then after that he was paroled due to diminished responsibility, loss of child and wife. Okay, if you don't give me my final vectors in the next minute, I will turn the ATC off and I'm gonna land whether there is an aircraft on the runway or not.
Boom.
Coming in a little higher this time. Power idle. Ready for touchdown. And touchdown.
Well, at least you made it to the ground.
After turning around, yes.
You had doubts?
No, I kind of knew he would, like, hit the ground.
She doesn't have doubts. She basically automatically assumes that I'm gonna crash and burn.
Nope. I'm just hoping for it.
If I ever become a pilot, you are not welcome in my plane.
I don't want to fly on your plane. You don't even serve coffee.
Free plane ride and you're even expecting coffee. Oh my god, you're such a freeloader. I am even providing quality plane crash investigation videos on my flights. But what else do you want?
Coffee.
Okay, Alpha 9. Gonna continue in Alpha until Alpha 13. Then gonna turn Bravo, then Alpha 15, and crossing Alpha 16.
Wagon worship. Where? Wow. Read.
still think you should try playing ATC.
We'll do it at some point.
How often do they fire the ATC?
When they like kill a couple hundred people.
Mm-hmm. Only.
I don't think they fire them. They like go on strike. Then they get what they want. There's never enough of them.
Mm.
Also, they tend to get the flu all at the same time.
I see.
I mean, there's a good reason there aren't enough ATCs. It's a fucking job that makes you age 10 years in about a week.
What is an ATC?
Air traffic controller.
Oh, yes.
I am so unfamiliar with this huge ass airport. I feel like a child lost in a mall.
Mommy!
Yep, my mommy is a retarded ATC.
Oh, there.
Alpha 13, yes, found Alpha 13 finally. Thank you. Now I'm gonna turn right here. When you read this taxi pattern introductory, you read it like 6, Sierra 7, Alpha 8, Alpha, Alpha 13, Bravo, Alpha 15, Alpha 16, Airwave, Romeo 9 or 9 or 2. If you can't hear, then you like, could you repeat? And then ATC basically wishes you really, really like painful death when you make them read everything again. Taxiing the gate Foxtrot 8 using taxiway runway 6. Yep. Yes.
I don't think you saw Breaking Bad, did you?
No, I didn't, no.
In one of the seasons, I think it's season 3, well, you see, Jesse gets a girlfriend, and the girlfriend's father is an air control,
Air traffic
controller.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the girl ends up dying from a heroin overdose. And Walter was directly involved with her death because he saw it happening and he didn't do anything about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
She was asphyxiated. But anyway, following that, her father was so grief-stricken that he wasn't able to properly do his job, and he ended up losing track of 2 planes. The planes crashed into each other above the city.
Okay.
It's kind of a cool scene. I thought you would appreciate it. When you brought it up, I couldn't help but be reminded.
Thank you. We'll check it out. Well, that was a pretty uneventful flight. At least nothing went wrong except for a couple of retarded ATCs. And one really retarded Bombardier pilot. There we go. After landing checklist, ATC turned on, watch turned off, landing gear off, taxi logo, anti-collision off, panel off, engine 1 off, electric off. Let's cut off the engines now. I don't need thrust reversers. 5 flaps off. 3 is off. There we go. This is what that jackass made me do. But look at that approach, almost perfect. But the first
Can't
one,
see it.
the first one was not almost perfect. The first one was absolutely perfect.
Can't see it.
I know, because it doesn't show you the analysis window for some reason.